Mike, check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector. And when the Capcom Fighting Collection was first announced, there was a ton of hype around it. A lot of people were excited to pick this game up. And since its physical release, I've really just seen this game sit on shelves in pretty much every store. I've seen a lot of games, a lot of other games selling out a lot faster than the Capcom Fighting Collection, which has me wondering if a lot of the hype was felt in a specific group of gamers, mainly those maybe Gen Xers and millennials who remember playing a lot of these games in the arcades, or was there genuine hype all around from the overall gaming community? And a big part of me feels like a lot of the hype around this game was really for that niche group of people who are diehard Capcom fighting fans and folks who play these games in the arcades. Now, the biggest thing and the biggest talk about this game was, would this version of these games live up to their originals? Now, I personally grew up in the 90s and in the late 2000s. I was in the arcade stores playing pretty much every single game that you have here, with the exception of The Punisher. The Punisher was the one game that I never played in the arcade, but I did have it for the Sega Genesis back in the day as a kid when I had a Sega, or when I was not, probably not when I was a kid, it was like my early teens. I had The Punisher as an early teenager for the Sega Genesis. Back then I only had the cartridge, but I knew back then that that was a sick beat 'em up because it was unlike other beat 'em ups I ever played. So the point of the matter being, do does the re-release, does this collection live up to the hype with a lot of the original games that came out back in the day? And I could tell you right now, I mean, I've played pretty much the arcade version of all these games as well as the home version of all these games, and I've been a diehard fan of all things fighting games, of all things Marvel, and all things Capcom for a long time. Even before like talk about these games, you could go back to Marvel Superheroes War of the Gems back on the Super Nintendo, which is where a lot of the character design, if you look even back then, those characters back then look a lot like the characters that you saw in Children of the Atom. Or even if you look back at a game like X-Men Mutant Apocalypse on the Super Nintendo, again, just more, I was always into that. And then, of course, I was always a huge Street Fighter Alpha fan. So when they put these two universes together, it was like a match made in heaven. Now, I could tell you honestly, when it comes to comparing the arcade version of all these games to the home console version of all these games, from what I've experienced, the Sega Saturn does the best job of bringing the arcade experience home in your living room. I've played Children of the Atom a lot. I remember I used to go to a band practice in Westchester, New York. I used to be a part of a band. Every day after band, I would go to this arcade store nearby and play Children of the Atom. And when I got Children of the Atom for the Sega Saturn, it was very, very close, not just in gameplay and in pixel presentation, but mainly in the sound. And that's a big part of the way that I judge a lot of these games, is the sound quality. I know that might sound like kind of dumb to some, but the way the music sounds, the reverb, like all of those things kind of factor into bringing in that arcade experience at home. So when it comes to Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter and X-Men versus Street Fighter, those were two arcade games that used to be at a comic store that I used to go to in the Bronx, and I played those all the time. And then I remember, like, not too long after they got those arcades, then they brought Marvel versus Capcom. Marvel Superheroes was a game that I had played at various arcade stores because they had this game at a lot of different arcade stores in New York. But Capcom for sure was a staple. Every day after school, if you didn't have, like, if the arcade for Capcom was busy, then your second option was going to be X-Men versus Street Fighter or Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter. And we would play that a ton. So I remember having arcade experiences with all of those. Then I remember back in the late 90s, then Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came out. And man, when that arcade hit, first of all, I used Spider-Man a lot in Capcom 1 because I used Spider-Man a lot in Marvel Superheroes and in Children of the Atom. But when Capcom 2 came out, it just felt like they kind of nerfed Spider-Man a little bit. Like he just like his hits weren't as effective, his combos weren't as effective. And once you started thinking about characters like Cable, Iceman, Magneto, all the, Juggernaut, a lot of these characters that just do way more damage, he couldn't really hold up. So I had to kind of switch up and choose different characters when Capcom 2 came around. But in terms of comparing the arcade experience to the home experience, Marvel vs. Capcom, the first one, came out on the PlayStation 1 and the Dreamcast. I don't think we definitely never got a Xbox version. At least I don't think. We never got an Xbox version of the first Marvel vs. Capcom. It was only PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast. And PlayStation 1, I'll be honest with you, the PlayStation 1 version had a really good sound when it came to the Marvel vs. Capcom. It almost had better sound than the Dreamcast, but the Dreamcast, I feel like, nailed the gameplay a lot closer than the PlayStation 1. But when it came to Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I mean, so I played it on the PlayStation 2 and the Dreamcast. Hands down, the Dreamcast is the best version to play Capcom 2. And in my opinion, it was the closest thing to the arcade experience, the Dreamcast version. PlayStation 2 version was great. The sound was good. Same thing with Xbox. It was decent, but the Dreamcast just did the best job of bringing that arcade experience home. And like I said, I never really played the Punisher like in the arcade. I never went to an arcade store, and I went to a lot of arcade stores, but I never went to an arcade store that actually had the arcade version of the Punisher. So I never got a chance to experience that. So now, as I open the Capcom Fighting Collection today, because I finally got it for the PlayStation 4, so I plan on playing it. It's kind of it's going to be tough to see if this version holds up to either the arcade versions or even the home-based versions that originally came out back in the 90s and early 2000s. As far as the Punisher goes, they say that this version of the Punisher that's on the Capcom collection is the best version because it's the true arcade version of the Punisher, but I have no experience there, so I won't really know how to make a judgment call on that. But if you are following the channel and you've played both the home-based version of the Punisher and the Capcom version, the Capcom collection version, let me know down in the comments which you think is better. The only Punisher that I know is the one for the Sega Genesis. That's the one I played. That's the one I beat, both with Nick Fury and the Punisher. And you know what's crazy is that the first time I beat this game, I didn't know how to do the bomb. Like there's an attack where you can drop bombs on the screen and kind of clear the screen. I didn't even know how to do that move the first time I played this back in the day because I got it cartridge only. I never had the instruction manual, so I didn't know how to do that special move. And it never occurred to me to go on like IGN or anything like that and figure out what that move was or how to do it. So I actually beat that game without using any special moves. I just had to literally like punch and kick my way through that game. So but this is going to be interesting to see how this new version lives up to all of the other ones. And honestly, there's just a ton of nostalgia just sitting in this circle for me. I am a diehard Capcom and Capcom 2 fan, a diehard X-Men versus Street Fighter fan. So this is really exciting for me to get. Hopefully you all got, those of you who are interested, you are able to get your physical copy. It does come with a comic book on both the PlayStation 4 and the Switch versions. So I'm excited about that. And I'm going to give it a run, and I will let you guys know if it's all that it's chalked up to be. But that does it for me. This is the only game I picked up today. I was tempted to buy a lot more, but I'm just keeping it really low key from here on out for the rest of the year. So I'll let you know if there's anything else that catches my eye. But that does it for me. It's the Y2K Collector. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.